Welcome to Worth Asking, a podcast questioning gender inequality in politics through interviews with politicians across South Asia. In these interviews, we ask leaders about their political journeys, the challenges they face, how they overcome them and emerge as leaders, and stories of allyship and support. Today, we have Nafisa Shah, who is a member of the National Assembly of Pakistan. After completing her undergraduate studies, she worked as a journalist, and her reporting on environmental problems, development, and gender issues won her acclaims at home and abroad. She was admitted as a Shrivening Scholar to the Institute of Social and Cultural Anthropology at Oxford University. When she returned to Pakistan in 2000 for her field research on honor killings, she was drawn into politics. She contested Khairpur's local body elections and won. From then on, there was no looking back. Dr. Shah was nominated for a collective Nobel Peace Prize in 2005, a significant first for a Pakistani woman. She also served as the chair of Pakistan's National Commission for Human Development. With several awards and recognitions on her name, this introduction can go on and on. But without further ado, let's get started with the questions that are worth asking. Welcome, ma'am, to the show.
Thank you very much, Aditi, and your South Asia Forum, CGAP, for having me here. And I'm sure that this is, to bring together voices of women across South Asia. It itself is a very powerful idea at a time that our countries are, polarized, and everybody's building barriers and nobody's thinking of breaking them. And so, thank you for bringing us all together on this important stage.
Thank you for your acknowledgement, ma'am. I cannot wait to start the conversation with you. So let's get started with a little bit more about your background and growing up as a woman in Pakistan.
Okay, well, in Pakistan and as elsewhere, I think it's very difficult to generalize as far as women or any other section of the society goes. And with women also, there are experiences of, there are class issues. So you have, issues of privilege, status issues, poverty, and so on. So all those intersecting experiences also inform women's experience of growing up and so on. But of course, there's no denying the fact that in South Asia and in Pakistan, there are structures of inequality. There are structures of discrimination that are pervasive, and that somehow even the most privileged woman would feel them at some stage in her life. As far as my own background goes, it traverses, of course, all these intersectionalities. So I come from a humble background originally. My grandfather, tribal beginnings from my maternal grandfather, and my paternal grandfather was a revenue officer. So they sort of were engaged with the state in terms of their incomes and jobs and so on. But the real two heroes of my life would be like my father, who began his political life as a person and as an individual, sort of who's challenging the status quo. And my mother also challenged the status quo of being a woman who herself never got the opportunity to go to school, but she was determined to educate her girls. So there was a feminist in her, and there was a anti-status quo leader in my father, and both of these informed, informed our own experience as we grew up. As far as our own, growing up was concerned, we at least I myself, I would say, we had the privilege of being growing up in a family that was relatively well settled when I became, as I said, my conscious stage. My father was very successful in politics. So we saw the ups and downs also of Pakistani politics, but he was successful in politics. He became a minister and so on. And my mother was perhaps because we were also Sayyids, and Sayyids in the class context is something similar, is higher status, but the Sayyids their identity, it's very important for them to create their identity as separate from others, and this is often done through the way they treat the women. And the women are often secluded, they are often exclusive, there's lots of internal marriages, and the Sayyids initially, of course, discouraged women from going into the public space. So this we grew up in this context that women don't go to school, Sayyid women, they marry at an early age. And so all these structures were around us. And the person to perforate those structures was was my mother. And this, of course, this activism, feminism, breaking the glass ceiling is something that we learned, early on in life. Also, the side to the privilege, the fact that, yes, we had the privileged background, but we were often out of power. And when we in Pakistani politics, if you're out of power, you're either in jail or you're facing cases and you're facing a lot of challenges. So that too came in as we were growing up. So we all, the girls all of our sisters, became very, very strong, independent, often rebels in our own ways. And I, of course, as a young woman, I was, there was this feminist, the natural feminist, the very highly conscious of my identity as a woman, because of this identity that as a Sayyid woman we've had to recognize earlier on, the consciousness of our being as women and of our identity that set us apart from others as Sayyid women. So this was how, the early on, what informed me and what was my experience of growing up. It was a struggle, of course. Growing up, we lost our mother earlier on, and so what we had as the heritage or legacy from my mother was that she struggled for us, so that we could become strong women, that we could get education in good schools, and that carried on all our life, and that is something that never stops. It's always there as a message that she left for us, that you have to be on your own, that you have to be strong, and that you have to excel as women. That it's a part of our consciousness.
Right. And as a strong, independent woman, when you decided to join politics, can you share a little bit more about that moment and what were the thoughts of those around you?
Well, there I'm maybe disappointing you when I say that I am a legacy politician. And in Pakistan now, in the politics, there's this party, the PTI, that sort of challenges the legacy politicians. There's a lot of criticism that comes with being a part of the legacy politics. What I mean by saying I'm a legacy politician is that because obviously my father was the one who started as a young man challenging status quo, challenging the local, we had this sort of landlordism in politics. He challenged, so he was the challenger, he was the innovator, he was a pioneer. But he joined mainstream politics in the Pakistan People's Party, was totally inspired by the leaders, which was Shahid Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, Shahid Mohtarma Benazir Bhutto. And so my entry point was at some stage, there's always this, when you are in a family that is doing politics, you learn the ropes early on. So, my father was always contesting elections, or we saw him facing military rules, facing cases, and so on. So we saw all that as children, and that is something that we learned on how to look at the ups and downs of politics, take it in your stride, but also to understand what power is about. This is something that we learned earlier on. And also, like fighting elections, the day-to-day side of fighting elections, the day-to-day part of doing politics and to engage with public. But here again was something that, again, being a woman, we were often, we could see all this, but from behind the barriers. And those barriers were broken, ironically, during the military rule when all the men were either in jails or facing cases. So women had to step out of their comfort zones and come out. So my cousin, for instance, took it upon herself to help the her male family members who were in jails. So our coming into politics actually started. The women, the Sayyid women, started politics by sending food to the to the male members in the jails. So that is something that we did, and then from then on, you kept stepping forward, and of course, having a woman leader helped us tremendously, because we could see that Shaheed Mohtarma Benazir Bhutto, despite the privilege again, had to struggle against these male military rulers, had to fight, to get every inch of power that, was her share. As she was a public leader and a public representative, that was her due. We could see that because she had tremendous public support. But being a woman, she still had to struggle. And so that was also one other opening. But my formal entry point into politics came in when I was asked to contest a local body election, exactly at the time when I was doing my PhD. And that decision, it literally fell into my lap, because ideally the male members would have contested this election. And for the local, like even for my father, the most favorite candidate would have been either a nephew or a son. But interestingly, somehow it fell into my lap, because the male members were either not available or not willing, or they were, they were challenging each other. So I came in to contest the local body elections as a Nazim, and I won it. And at that time, the narrative that was built during my election was, especially by my opponents, their main election propaganda was, well, look, this is this huge district in Khairpur, and in this big district, they couldn't find a single man to bring in as a contestant for elections. And here it is, they've brought in a woman who can't speak the language. They sort of propagated that I couldn't speak the language, although of course I could speak Sindhi. They propagated this, that she's a woman, so that, they couldn't find, and they've actually used this metaphor of saying, oh, the men should wear bangles and should sit inside their homes, because they have now brought in a woman to contest. So they were trying to ridicule my party, they were trying to ridicule the men of my family, they were trying to ridicule our group. But of course, that didn't work. We won, and from then onwards, it was no going back. And although at that time, my father sort of, because I was studying, I was at Oxford, he said, well, you can contest the election and you can go back. So you will be the absentee leader. You will just have the name, and all the men around will work, do the day-to-day politics. But interestingly, the day I contested the election, the second day, all the men were gone, and I was left there, and I was facing the hundreds and hundreds of people of my district. And from then onwards, it was no going back. And so I did, and that was the time that, as I said, I broke the glass ceiling of doing, I was the first ever Nazim or a mayor in my district, a woman mayor ever. And at that point, there were only 2 women in the province and in all of Pakistan who were women mayors. And one of them was myself. The other was my friend, my sister, my colleague, Faryal Talpur. And we both became tremendously famous. And even though there was a military ruler at that time, General Musharraf, he was forced to contend with these 2 strong women who were both opposing him, because we were from a democratic party that was challenging the military rule. So here were these 2 women at the local level challenging this dictator who had to contend with us. And so I think that was a very, very empowering moment for myself. And I could talk about that experience for going on and on and on. But and there were a lot of my own conceptions about being a woman in politics, my own apprehensions. A lot of them were challenged every day as I sat there and resolved people's issues. But we also challenged the dictator from the party platform.
And just like you could talk on and on, I think we can hear these stories on and on, because they are indeed very, very inspiring. And just to take it a little bit forward, while switching from local to national politics and becoming a well-known face, a well-known woman in politics, we talked about a lot of challenges. Can you tell us a little bit more about how did you navigate through them? How did you overcome these challenges to reach where you are today?
Well, I think that women, as women, we have to really work hard and never take anything for granted. So our struggle really never ends. And even though, as I said, there is a sense of privilege, the privilege of being a legacy politician, the privilege of being in a party who has been led by a woman, a strong woman, all this automatically creates space and acceptance. But again, for us, the navigation is an everyday struggle, and it never really stops. Your challenges never end. At the level of national politics, because the recognition came when the party entrusted this role, and it was a party through the party that we were able to win. So the party confidence in us as workers is something that gave us that recognition. But then at the local level, in order to in order to resolve people's problems, that was the challenge. Being a woman sitting on the seat of the mayor and ensuring that whoever comes to me gets his or her problem solved, being taken seriously as a woman. This is something that we had to establish earlier on. And so, sometimes we are demonized because it's, oh, here is this nasty woman, she's bossy, she's blah blah. So we are demonized easily, but sometimes we do take on the demon role as well in order to get the things done. So the local level is really the toughest part of being in politics, the face-to-face politics, the face-to-face issues. There's a lot of conflict at the local level that you have to resolve. Sometimes you become a part of that. Then there is, you see the violence face to face, all that. So I actually went through the grind in those 4 years, and I think that kind of training gave me the credentials of then moving up at a level that is a policy level. And that was perhaps easy, that for the now Pakistan has these quotas, reservation quotas in the national and provincial parliaments. So for me, it was easy to graduate from that level and go into, because the party obviously from having that legacy, working hard as a Nazim, and having gotten that recognition not only within the party but among the public, my next step was to get those reserved quota. The actual challenge was when I wanted to move out from that comfort zone of the party quota, and into contesting a general seat with against male politicians. That is where I had to fight against my male colleagues, contend within the party against my male colleagues. And that is like, climbing on a very, very steep mountain and really not, knowing what would happen. So that has been a struggle, I must say. And I'm, again, in a way, obliged to the party leadership for recognizing that despite facing those challenges from my male colleagues, were constantly saying, oh, let's push her into the woman's seat. Why doesn't she contest, have the easy woman's seat? Why does she want to contest? Why does she want to contest? That is where I struggled. But, thank God I contested, and here I am. I've contested twice, and twice I've been on a reservation seat. So the first time round, I got the highest votes ever in my district and the highest gap ever, like highest lead ever, the first time. The second time, I got the highest lead ever in the district, and highest votes ever in the district, and also one of the highest among the women, contending in Pakistan, I would say. And I'm thankful to my party and really the people of my district who have really supported me. Despite all the demonization that goes on, they have stood by me all this time.
Your commitment and your hard work definitely reflects in the stories and your journey that you are sharing, ma'am. And for the same, you have also received a lot of awards, recognitions. You have been nominated even for the Nobel Peace Prize. So I'm sure that many other women in politics look up to you for inspiration, for motivation. So if I ask you, what is your proudest achievement in politics so far?
Well, I think my versatility, because when I was a journalist, I was recognized internationally. I got at least 3 awards or recognitions. Then I got the UN Global Role of Honor for environmental reporting. I got the APNS award, and I got recognition in international publications as one of the brave, bold women journalists. And then at the district level, again, because I was not only strong, but I was defiant. I could defy the military ruler. I could defy being in the opposition at that time at the district level. I could defy the provincial government, and hold on to my own agenda and my own program, all that, and then able to deliver. I think that got me a recognition at the local level. I was recognized as the World Economic Forum's young leader, and I was, of course, I got this collective. There were several, I think, 1,200 women across the globe, 5 or 6 women from them in Pakistan, and I was one of them. The collective recognition that we got, and that is, as I said, because at the local level I was able to, and then at the national level when I came in, then making my mark in the parliament. I think the versatility is something that I would say has been one of my strong points. The fact that I can engage with a very local issue, and then become one of the people at that level, and then step out of that and the next day sit in the parliament and work on a very intellectual issue or a policy issue. On a third day, go and address like a public meeting, and then on a fourth day, go into my constituency and attend, organize a jalsa. So these multiple levels at which you can work in is something that I have learned. And I think that is perhaps what I would say, something that has allowed me to perform at multiple levels it's like the shape shifting, the multitasking, the ability to work at different levels and different things at one time is something that I have learned, and this is something that has allowed me to make my presence felt and perhaps also lead at the local level and also within the party.
Yes, and on a sixth day, talk to us at Worth Asking and be such an amazing orator.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Not only awards and recognitions, ma'am, but you have also represented Pakistan at various international forums. You have been the vice chairperson of the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association. So, what are your experiences at these forums as a young woman leader from South Asia?
Yes. Okay. So I got this opportunity to become the vice chairperson, and it really fell into my lap. I wasn't even expecting it. Actually, Pakistan was contesting the election to be the chairperson of the parliament, the CPA, the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association. So we lost the chairperson, and perhaps this was a consolation that I had the various regions coming up to me and saying, well, I wasn't the contender for the chairperson. That was another colleague, but she couldn't make it. But then I had 2 regions coming up to me and said, well, would you like to represent us in the Exco? And I said, well, I don't know. I mean, it was a total surprise. And suddenly I was nominated and elected unanimously twice. So that really fell into my lap. The Commonwealth Parliamentary Association is a very, very interesting forum where all you learn about the different regions and their dynamics. And I was representing South Asia, and honestly speaking, my disappointment, I could see the African region was very, very strong. And there were other regions which had regional solidarity. And what we didn't have in South Asia, and this is perhaps one thing that is something that for me is a very important part of my work in progress, if ever I get the opportunity at an international level, is to really work on a South Asian solidarity that goes beyond the Pakistan-India day-to-day, bickering that we do, or day-to-day issues that we have, on. So really, I missed, and perhaps one of the reasons why in the Commonwealth, South Asia is a very weak region is because we miss that South Asian solidarity. I tried to, build that South Asian solidarity, but I was there for only 2 terms. Sometimes the solidarity reflects because now when I got the opportunity, I lobbied within my own parliament that we should support when there was a nomination for a Bangladeshi chairperson, election for a chairperson who came from, this is Madam Shireen, Honorable Shireen, I actually lobbied to support her. I said, well, at that time, Pakistan and Bangladesh were poles apart as far as the relationship was going. But I said, no, let's work towards South Asian solidarity. And I actually lobbied to support her, and we did support her, and she won. So, that is something that I managed to do diplomatically, was to work towards South Asian solidarity within the Commonwealth. And I think that is really, really important, in not just Commonwealth, but in every forum, because we really have to move forward in the world. We have to, at one level, on a minimum agenda, build a South Asian solidarity. That was a part of the vision of my great leader, Shahid Benazir Bhutto, and I really think that that's something that we need to work at.
Absolutely, ma'am. And talking of solidarity, you also served as the General Secretary of the Women's Parliamentary Caucus in Pakistan. So, how do you think cross party solidarity among women parliamentarians helps? Why is it important? And can you provide some examples of successes from your experiences so far?
Okay, well, that parliament, that was my first term as a parliamentarian, moving from, as you had asked, from a local mayor to a national parliamentarian. And that parliament, of our, it was a very difficult time for all of us, because that parliament came after 2008 elections, and in that elections we lost Shahid Mohtarma Benazir Bhutto in a terrorist attack. I don't know if you would remember, but that was a very, very hideous, vicious part of experience that we are still suffering. The country is suffering, of course, and then our party suffered tremendously as a result of that terrorist attack. And we lost a very, very great leader, a very important voice for women and for Pakistan in the world, at the world stage. And there, then some of us women, I had, as I said, a background in feminism. And the feminist in our family was my mother. And then I was in the women's movement also for some time. And I said, well, we are all here on the women reserve seats, and let us do something that we can perhaps set a good example of, some unified voice for women. Now we were 60 in number, but we said if we come together, we can even make that voice more important, more significant, and more meaningful. And that is what led to this making of this cross-party caucus. I was one of the founders of the cross-party caucus. I was the secretary of the cross-party caucus. And this cross-party caucus is now, it's institutionalized within the parliament. So it's not one of those informal forums, which are there in many, many parliaments, as is cross-party caucusing, but this has slightly a formal role, and it has some resolutions backing it, and it has endorsements of the speaker. And we were the pioneers, so we founded it. We had to grab a space in the parliament. We said, as women, we have to get space. We have to, and it's always an issue of space for women, as you know, whether in Pakistan, India, elsewhere. How do we get your space? So we found a little space, we sat there, and we started doing our advocacy for women and for legislation, women-friendly legislation and human rights legislation. And because of that space that we created, in that period from 2008 to 13, we were able to do a lot of human rights legislation, gender legislation. That was the parliament that passed protection of women in workforce law. We passed protection of detained women, a law on that. And we strengthened the Human Rights Commission. We strengthened the Women's Rights Commission. We strengthened the Constitution itself. And I'm not saying that the caucus was central to it, but the caucus was not even marginal. I mean, we did play a significant role. And we created what is very important, is that we created a consciousness for women, a self-aware consciousness for women, which is very, very important, because even, as we have these reserve seats, it is easy for men to push women back and put us on the back benches. And that is something that we said we will not want. So like active, meaningful voices for women who often spoke for each other across the aisle as well. For us, we were in the treasury benches, but we spoke up for women in general. And this is something that has sort of continued as a tradition. If there is some male filibustering on gender lines, if they try to make jokes on women, which they like often, then here we stand up to them and we don't take nonsense. So that kind of consciousness is something that Women's Caucus also led to. And also, we still, what is work in progress for us is how we can increase the numbers of women in the parliament. That is something we still haven't succeeded in, but it's a work in progress.
Right, ma'am. And if we draw from your doctoral research that you did, would you say that there are violent crimes and attacks targeting women in politics? Did you encounter any violence targeting your gender, especially in your entire political journey? And what do you think should be done to make political spaces safer for women?
Well, the most stark example for women being affected by violence or being victims to violence is none other than our leader, Mahatma Benazir Bhutto. She was targeted, became a target of extremism, became a target of terrorism herself. And so actually, we can say that, even women are not, although, looking at our culture, looking at Islam, women are often, they are often protected. They have cultural protection, they have religious protection, and our of course our constitution is very strong as far as protection of women goes and rights of women go. And it's like any other constitution, it's a good strong constitution on women's rights. And yet we faced all this. So Pakistan has been a war-torn country. We have, the war in Afghanistan has spilled over in Pakistan at multiple times, and even now we face a lot of law and order situation. And there, these law and order situations often target women. There have been times when women voters have been targeted. There have been, there have been male consensus on stopping women from voting, which we had to fight and contend with in the 2013 parliament. So there have been structural forms of violence and often targeting women. So those challenges we face individually. Myself, yes, there had been an attack, and I nearly became a victim. Although I was not the direct target of that attack, it was a feud, and I was doing my general politics. I was going into that program, and those people were targeted. I was luckily I was protected from that attack. So the overall violent context does not is not safe for anyone, but it's not safe for women either. And as I said, I gave the example of Shaheed Mohtharma Benazir Bhutto on this. On the story itself, on gender-based violence, yes, honor-based violence is really vicious, and it's often. I mean, my thesis was that the structure of the law often informs violence. So it's the violence is not something that so the state, systems of justice, if there is weakness in the systems of justice or in the structure of the law, it often creates a space for violence. That was my argument on the gender-based violence and honor crimes in Pakistan, and that was my interest. That is what I observed both as an administrator and a Nazim, and then before that as a journalist, is something that I worked on. And of course, women face all forms of violence. Home-based violence is there. We have now violence, the domestic, anti-domestic violence laws in all the provinces, not yet in the center, but they are there, they exist. And so they're all forms of violence. And there is, of course, there are laws against them, but I don't know how active they are. Some of them are, others are not. It's something that we are working at in the parliament.
Also, ma'am, while we were researching, we also Googled about women in Pakistani politics, and we found articles that were titled most beautiful women in Pakistani politics. Or, quite often we have also seen cases where women are asked about their domestic responsibilities or their relationships when the topic of the interview is politics. So, how do you respond to such questions that are often sexist or regressive in nature?
Well, I think there is also very strong, as I said, there's a strong consciousness now among women. And this is not just my generation, the younger generation are, in your face. So we have this event called the Aurat March, which often are, the male status quo politicians or the status quo systems often find that a big, big challenge. But these women actually really challenge all these stereotypes, including these stereotypical systems of, and then the social media, of course, has changed that also. So these portrayals of women in these stereotypical ways, patronizing ways, generalizing ways, is something that is not just peculiar, it's not just there in Pakistan, but I'm sure, South Asia generally, and elsewhere in the world also. But thankfully, social media, a strong middle class. Despite the fact that women are really we are far behind in the socioeconomic indicators, there is still a very strong community of activist women who would challenge that. And there have been several instances where these stereotypical portrayals of women or questioning. Yeah, I mean, even this time when I walked out of my my oath taking, fourth time oath taking ceremony in the parliament, the first question that confronted me was on, what kind of dress. And I said, well, if you ask the same question for men, then that's fine, and I'll answer you. But don't just make it. So we challenge them, we embarrass them when they ask these questions. So and I enjoy it when I have to do that.
Right. And, ma'am, how do you perceive men's role as allies in supporting and advocating for women's participation in politics? According to you, what are those actions that male politicians can take to be effective, better allies?
I feel that political parties have to now come and put forward their best. And they have to now say, well, let us work towards an ideology where women and men, can work together, and we look at merit and not just, being male. But unfortunately, even today in Pakistan, politics is really heavily, heavily, heavily male, and with women, it's often like, by my party, I would say is one of the best, or probably the best as far as women go, because we have had women chairperson, two women chairs. Even now, we have strong women in leadership positions. So there is a lot of space culturally within our party, but I wouldn't say that for general politics. In Pakistan, it's still very sexist and male. And men, I often, when it comes to, like, Pakistan has a law now which says that political parties have to nominate at least 5% women on general seats, apart from the 60, the quota seats. We have 60 quota seats in the parliament, and then we have these 5%. And even in that 5%, the male, the men right now do not want to give space. And obviously, they feel women as contenders. So I think that can only be changed if political parties come up and create consciously, as a responsible party, space for women to contend on general positions, but also give as many party positions to women, especially younger women, as possible. That is, again, something that we ask for within our own parties, and in the parliament we talk about it all the time. But again, Pakistan is facing such huge challenges: economic, political stability, and so on. And so one of the challenges for women is really, on the national agenda, on the national radar, women are not catching the attention that they should, as looking at the problems that we face as a sector, as half of the population. and not women in their own right. So that is something that we are constantly trying to see how we can make women part of the mainstream political agenda as women.
Uh, what would your message to these young women who are aspiring to join Pakistani politics be, and how would you like to support them?
Well, my support to them is obviously because of my politics, and I'm, as I said, very conscious gender rights politician. Whether it's support to the caucus or generally in the policy making and the law making, women are central to my financial inclusion, for instance, women's empowerment, for instance. So my work in the parliament is a lot about consciousness for women, and perhaps that is already creating a space for women. But my message more to from the younger women may be ready, but the problem is, where is the space, where is the structure for their entry points, and that is where my message would be for our own political parties, is that we have to create a structure and a system where we make it easier for women, younger women, to come and join politics. So that is something that the parties have to really work at and think through.
Right. Any final message from your end, ma'am, before we wrap up?
Because this is a South Asian forum, I would really want, and I have tried when I was in the caucus, that there has to be South Asian consciousness also. And that consciousness has to be different from the general male politics that is like how to divide the power, the creating barriers. And so we have to work at breaking barriers, and that is really the best way women can come forward, is to do a different kind of politics, a politics that is more about bringing things together, that is about delivering, that is about social cohesion, recognizing pluralism, and so on. So that is what I think we all need to work at a regional level and locally and at Pakistan level, that women should really not ever give up, and that it's a struggle, uphill task, and we have to just continue to break the glass ceilings, but to reach the stage where we have to where there is no glass ceiling, where all the barriers are gone. So I guess we have to work towards unity, solidarity, and a common conscious agenda for women.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, ma'am. It was indeed a pleasure talking to you and very, very inspiring and motivating.
Thank you very much, Aditi. It was a pleasure to be on this forum.
Thank you for joining us on Worth Asking. We express our gratitude to 81 donors who made this year's podcast possible. To learn more about our work and how you can support us, please join our community by visiting www.cgapsouthasia.org/join. If you enjoyed the podcast, please leave us a review and share with your peers, especially young women interested in joining politics. Thank you and stay tuned.